Rails to trails and affordable housing are both good ideas, but rarely do they come together in one project. Manhattan's downtown High Line is a huge success, but as it weaves through luxury condos, it encourages more to be built. However, a new proposal for a Harlem Promenade could result in both a linear park like the High Line and affordable homes. The man with the plan is Daniel Marks Cohen, the Vice President and Director of Real Estate Development at the affordable housing organization called the Housing Partnership. Welcome.
Thank you.
And we have some slides to show our viewers of the renderings of this. So let's put the first one up right away, and then we'll talk through some of the visuals. So here we go with the first view. Tell us what we're looking at.
So this is an example that was drafted by Office of James Burnett, which is a landscape architect, of what a potential park on top of the rail lines would look like. It's a little different from the High Line itself, because the High Line, the park, was built on the rail bed. This is actually being built above the Amtrack rail lines. And although this design is beautiful and fanciful, it's in likelihood going to be much smaller and maybe not more than a few blocks rather than like a mile.
Give us our bearings here. We're seeing the Hudson River over there and the George Washington Bridge.
Right. So this is about 140th, 145th Street. The Riverbank State Park.
Just above the Riverbank State Park.
Yes, just above Riverbank State Park.
Which is 135th Street.
Right.
And there's the bike path, which goes the length of the Hudson River in Manhattan at this point, which is running somewhere along there. And there's the Henry Hudson Parkway or West Side Highway somewhere along there, right?
Right. In this case, it's actually been put at grade, but it's actually an elevated highway. This is just an example of what it might look like. The park is really supposed to be the focus. And although this is one example of what it could be, it isn't likely to be quite this long.
Right. The tracks, these are the Amtrack tracks coming out of Penn Station as the Amtrack heads north along the river toward Albany and other points north and west.
Right.
So where do they emerge from underground?
Sure. Right at 123rd Street to about 158th Street is where the rail lines are uncovered by Riverside Park. North of 158th Street, they actually switch positions with the highway and they hug the shore of the Hudson River all the way up to Albany to Canada, actually. But this one section, and the reason why that's the most important, is because that one section is actually zoned land and has air rights, which can be used for, in this case, we're proposing for affordable housing.
So this next slide gives us a sense of how you define those air rights and why they give you an opportunity for affordable housing. And again, I guess the top is west. So that's Riverbank State Park.
That's
at the
right.
Top, and the river, and then then you're moving into Manhattan there, Broadway to Amsterdam, et cetera.
That's right. The southern end, between 123rd and about 130th Street, and the northern third, about 145th Street to about 158th, are zoned land that can be used. It's actually residentially zoned land, but we're not proposing to build anything on top of. At least certainly no housing on top of the rail line. What we're proposing is actually the air rights would be transferred over into this yellow-lined area, which would be a new special purpose district on Broadway.
Along Broadway?
Yes.
What's there right now? This is just north of where Columbia is going to put its West Harlem campus?
Precisely. Manhattanville is actually a little bit, about 125th to about 135th Street. And there are about a dozen sites along Broadway that are taxpayer sites. They're 1 to 2 story retail sites. There are no people living in them. It's just retail businesses. And what we're proposing is the air rights would be transferred over to be developed on those sites. Currently the zoning rules allow for a 12-story building. We're suggesting a slightly taller building to allow for greater density in exchange for 50% affordable housing.
So here's another view that helps to explain that same thing?
Right. So this is a cross-section which shows the Amtrack rail lines, and then the air rights would be sort of transferred over to Broadway and to potential receiver sites, as I mentioned. They would actually enable the sites to be built slightly taller than they currently are allowed.
Do you have any community opposition? Do people know about it yet? Because in general, people object when more high-rise development is coming to their neighborhood anywhere in the city.
For sure. We've had a chance to talk with all of the elected officials, and we've had a chance to meet with the community board and a number of community stakeholders, and the response has generally been quite positive. I think people have lots of questions, and we're hoping to work through the process to satisfy them. Part of the reason why this proposal has gotten some attention is because we're talking about 2,000 units of affordable housing that will be permanently affordable. Under the current zoning, someone could build on on those dozen sites that I mentioned tomorrow, and they could be 100% market rate luxury housing, or in some cases they could be what's known as an 80-20, 80% market, 20% affordable. We're proposing 50-50.
50-50. And this, I guess, is consistent with the de Blasio administration's view of both, or vision, both of a lot of affordable housing and of density,
Yes.
increased density as a means to that affordable housing.
The mayor had a proposal of 200,000 units over 10 years that would be maintained and created affordable units, and this would certainly dovetail with that objective of 50% affordability.
And this next rendering, it seems to indicate that you're not even talking about buildings that are that much higher than what's presently there?
Right. What we're trying to show is that the current zoning would allow 12 stories, and then just by adding a few more stories to go to 16 stories, you'd be able to absorb all of the excess air rights, which we estimate to be about 2 million square feet over the rail lines. If you don't allow those extra 4 stories, you have less square footage to be absorbed, and it's less affordable housing.
Why stop at 16, for that matter? There are plenty of buildings right nearby there in Harlem that are more than 16 stories, right?
Sure. Well, Harlem went through put a lot of thought into a rezoning process in 2012, and they upzoned a certain area at 145th Street and Broadway, and they made that 16 stories, or 160 feet was the maximum height limit for that intersection. And we thought that since they already had accommodated that by providing inclusionary housing at that intersection, that we would also adhere to 160 feet as well.
Tell us some about your organization, the Housing Partnership.
Sure. We've been around for almost 40 years, and we've helped create about 40,000 units of affordable housing. We're not a developer, but we partner with real estate developers to help facilitate the creation of affordable housing in all 5 boroughs.
How optimistic are you about the future and the possibility of the de Blasio administration reaching its 200,000 goal?
I think it's ambitious, but there certainly seems to be a strong head of steam behind it, and we're hoping to be a part of it.
One more slide here. This, I guess, explains visually some of what you were saying before, but why don't you walk us through this?
Sure. So under the current zoning, about 2,000 units of housing could be constructed. About 1,600 units would be market rate, and 400 units would be affordable under what's known as the 80-20 model. In our proposal, we would actually create essentially 4,000 units of housing, and it would be split, 2,000 market rate units and 2,000 affordable units. So for a slight increase in the total amount of market rate units, you get a substantial increase in the number of affordable units. And an important thing to note, Brian, is that right now the area median income for New York City is about $86,000. But in West Harlem, it's about $40,000. So when we talk about affordable, we mean making sure that the units are affordable for people who live in West Harlem in that $40,000 for a family of 4 range.
We just have a minute left as we look at the aerial rendering of the potential promenade again. The economics are that the park subsidizes the housing to some degree?
No, actually what is the sale of the air rights. The air rights are about 2 million square feet, and they're owned by the city. And those would be sold to private developers who would build on those dozen sites that I've mentioned before. And the sale of those air rights, let's say they're sold at $100 a foot, which is below market to incur the creation of affordable housing, would yield about $200 million. And that money would go towards construction of the affordable housing, as well as some public infrastructure improvements like park improvements, and maybe some improvements to the transportation network.
So where are we at in getting this approved and built?
Well, we're in the process. As I've said, we've been talking to the community board and elected officials and city agencies. We're optimistic it's moving forward at the pace that we thought, and we hope to come back soon and talk about its further success.
Do you see similar models that create more Highline-like parks and affordable housing elsewhere in the city, or is this unique to this place?
If this proposal becomes reality, it will be the largest creation of affordable housing units in almost half a century since the creation of the Brook houses in the 1950s. There have been lots of proposals for affordable housing, and there's been lots of proposals for High Lines. Queensway, which is the Rails to Trails or Rails to Park proposal that's under consideration now, but they rarely include both, and it's because there's available air rights that we're able to enact this proposal.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And that's our show for today. We are here